Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, on the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Akimale here in Abuja. Let's begin tonight by letting you know what happened today, where former President Goodluck Jonathan has been speaking on the need for electoral reforms in Nigeria. President Jonathan today recalled how the country, the technology introduced by the Independent National Electoral Commission under former chairman Atairu Jega rejected him, his wife, and his mother during the 2015 general election. The former INEC boss was equally present at the same event today, where he was also asking for an urgent fix to our electoral process. He was speaking today at the Yaga Africa Reflection Conference on Democratic Elections in West Africa in Abuja. So much to talk about, and we'll be going from a lot of reflections on what happened in our recent electoral process and governance in Nigeria, especially what happened during former president, he said military president, military head of state, Ibrahim Babangida. But a lot of what has been said in his book is getting the reaction. But before we get into that, let's give you up to speed, bring you up to speed on our political roundup.
The Senate today unanimously voted to refer Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan to the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions for disciplinary review following her heated outburst in the chamber. The committee, chaired by Senator Neda Imasuen, has been given 2 weeks to report back on its findings. The decision was reached following a voice vote after lawmakers revisited the controversy surrounding the recent altercation between Senator Natasha Akpoti and the Senate leadership over seat allocation, with lawmakers underpinning the need to uphold parliamentary rules and decorum. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has filed a suit against the Senate President, Senator Godswill Akpabio, for allegedly defaming her. In the suit filed before the Federal Capital Territory High Court on February the 25th, 2025, the President of the Senate, Federal Republic of Nigeria, and senior legislative aide to the Senate President, Mfon Patrick, were listed as second and third defendants. In the suit, Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan, through her lawyer, Victor Giwa, alleged that the words by the Senate President and published by his aide on his Facebook page with the title "Is Local Content Committee of the Senate Natasha's Birthright?", where he stated that the claimant, though being a lawmaker, is all about pancaking her face and wearing transparent outfits to the chambers. Giwa noted that the statement on Akpoti-Uduaghan was defamatory, provocative, disparaging, and lowered her dignity in the eyes of her colleagues and right-thinking members of the public. She, however, urged the court to order the defendant to pay her 100 billion naira as damages and 300 million naira as litigation costs. Dozens of youth from the Niger Delta region have staged a protest at the gates of the National Assembly in Abuja to demand an apology from Senator Natasha Akpoti over what they described as disrespect to the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio. The group says the reaction of the lawmaker was not the best way to go, as it puts the entire Senate in a bad light, as if it is a lawless entity. The group is calling on Senator Natasha to immediately apologize to the Senate President within the next 7 days.
She owes not just the Senate President an apology, she owes the Niger Delta youth apology, she owes the Nigerian youth an apology, and she, as the Senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, she had to show respect to the Nigerian youth.
To be remanded in the custody of the Department of State Security Services, DSS, for alleged assault on some of his officers. Justice Daniel Osiago ordered the remand of the trio, Ibrahim Olarenwaju, Adetu Adekunle, and Fatima Adetola, to enable the court more time to go through the case file. The DSS will therefore hold them in custody pending their arraignment tomorrow. In the 6-count charge against them, dated February the 24th, 2025, and filed on Tuesday, the DSS accused them, along with others still at large, of conspiring to assault officers of the State Security Service while they were performing their official duties without any reasonable excuse. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice Lateef Fagbemi SAN says recent conflicts between local government chairmen and governors is primarily about who has the authority to conduct elections. The minister made the remarks while commissioning the newly constructed Kebbi State Office of the National Human Rights Commission in Birnin Kebbi. He added that efforts were underway not only to ensure financial autonomy for local governments, but also to grant them administrative independence.
Mr. President, due to his predisposition to respecting human rights directed that the Board of Human Rights Commission be immediately removed from the dissolved board and restored, and the board has continued to enjoy full cooperation and support of the current government to date.
Some leaders in northern Nigeria are calling for the establishment of a northern development plan in response to concerns over the region's underdevelopment, despite its abundant resources. Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State and Governor Inuwa Yahaya of Gombe State emphasized that northern Nigeria requires a unified effort to enhance the region's future prospects. These views were expressed during the 11th Sir Ahmadu Bello Memorial Lecture in Bauchi State. And Antonio Okocha-led Rivers APC faction is calling on Governor Siminalayi Fubara to obey the appeal court judgment and represent the budget to the Rivers State House of Assembly, led by Martin Ameule. Mr. Okocha made this known in Port Harcourt after a meeting of the leadership of his faction of the party. He lamented that the governor cherry-picks the favorable court decisions to obey while ignoring those not in his favor. Mr. Okocha also denied that he received the 27 lawmakers into the APC. He instead claimed that he was only wooing them into the party.
There you have it. You've been served with your political roundup story. So tonight, it might be some hard eating and reflections on prison times and some very horrific military day treatment. So more reactions keep coming on the release of former military president Ibrahim Babangida's memoir, which has reignited debate about Nigeria's political history. A significant revelation in the book involved the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election, which Babangida admitted was won by Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, popularly known as MK Abiola. From what the account of the former military head of state Babangida in the book, he says the annulment was influenced by forces within his administration, allegedly led by Sani Abacha. It's late. Tonight, I'm being joined by one of those whose voices were very loud during the military junta and had to sleep in jail many times for their activities. They were in fact very notorious for in some prison cells because they visited it more than multiple times. Perhaps one of the few who survived the brutality of the military days is a younger Femi Falana, and his life for us here in our studio here in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Femi Falana.
Thank you very much.
At some point, I had a conversation with, let us say, Nike Falana, of how your days in prison during the military days and how he had to independently take care of the children and in your absence when spending times in jail. But I'm imagining what kind of reflections IBB's book would have brought to your mind. In summary, how do you describe the record and the record and the account of former head of state Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida?
Well, I've taken time. I persuaded myself to read the book, and the impression I gathered at the end of the day was that an attempt was made by the retired general to recall events, but perhaps in an attempt to tell a story, he engaged in what I would call a careless distortion of history, because there are gaps that he was unable to fill at the end of the day. And I think he also might have forgotten that not all the dramatists personnel have passed away. So history has already taken care of the Babangida tenure. Any attempt by him now to rewrite history failed woefully in the book.
So from your own point of view, you don't quite agree with some of the accounts, especially in some of the dated events and some of the events which you personally are involved. And perhaps let's take it one after the other, because if we both are involved in an event, our accounts may be different depending on where the koboko hits, because the military used koboko a lot on the civilians at the time. But where the koboko hits more on you and where it hurts, where in the book did you feel that the account of IBB was distorted?
Many areas of the book. I mean, talking about the annulment of the election, General Babangida claimed that he traveled to Katsina on the 23rd of June 1993, and he was flabbergasted to learn about the annulment. I beg your pardon. No. All programs in the second quarter of the schedule, political transition program schedule, including June 12 election. He also banned the courts, particularly the Court of Appeal, that were then entertaining the case. And the Court of Appeal was going to decide the validity of the ex parte order of Justice Ikpeme and the ex parte order of Justice Saleh in the face of Section 19 of Decree 25 of 1987, that no court shall inquire into or make any order to stop elections. No interim order, no interlocutory order or final order will be made by any court to stop the conduct of election. So when they discover, when the junta discovered that the Court of Appeal was going to set aside those orders, a decree was enacted by General Babangida on the 22nd of June. So altogether, 5 decrees which justified the annulment. So the announcement of 23rd by Unduka Irabo was anchored on the decrees enacted by him the previous day, justifying the annulment of election. That's number one. Number two, between 23rd of August and 26th, General Babangida promulgated 7 decrees, again to confirm the annulment, to legalize the interim national government, and for the country to move on. He claimed that he was not aware. He was taken aback on the 23rd of June. But on the 26th of June, he made a broadcast, a nationwide broadcast, justifying the annulment and alleging that the election was riddled with corruption, corrupt practices. Even though it appeared to have been fair and free, but the election could not be relied upon. Also on the 22nd of June, he annulled, or rather set aside, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, headed by the late Justice Bola Babalaki, set up by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Chief Justice Mohammed Bello. So how he can turn around to give the impression that some forces, without his knowledge, annulled the election. It's not
Could it be
fair to
Could it be, Mr. Falana, that maybe the man at the very top is not really aware of the machinations of all of the scheming, and a lot of things happened.
The man at the top signed the decree to annul the election. Signed the decree.
Maybe he doesn't know the details of the...
No, to stop Babangida, you know, he was sufficiently intelligent. And he once said, in the face of the crisis, I'm not only in office, I am in power. And he exercised the power against the interests of Nigeria. He also said at that time that they are not the election in the national interest. He never mentioned Abacha. No. And in any case, the annulment you are talking about was perhaps the last stage of the manipulation. Following the criminal annulment of the election, the campaign for democracy organized peaceful protest in many parts of the country. General Babangida ordered that the late Chief Gani Fawoimi, the late Dr. Bekoram Somkuchi, and myself be arrested and brought to Abuja here, where we were charged before a chief magistrate in Wuse here for the allegations were unlawful assembly, conspiracy, unlawful assembly, and sedition. What was the sedition about? That we had published the results of the election, which he has not published in his book. But at that time, it was a criminal. He made it a criminal offense. Our bail was refused at the instance of the government. Again, the junta thought foolishly that once we were put away, there would be no protest in the country any longer. So we were sent to Kuje prison here. Again, sensing that we might get bail in the High Court, General Babangida ordered that we be detained in addition to the court remand under the State Security Detention of Persons Decree number 2 of 1984. And so we were detained. Now you said we committed an offense by challenging the annulment of election. 32 years later, you are now saying, oh, I regret that we are not the election. So that means you knew. You deliberately arrested me, detained me, charged me, and paraded me as a criminal, only for you to say now, sorry. No, he didn't say sorry. We regret what we did. No apologies. For me, we are taking it beyond the book. A year earlier, because Nigerians must not forget the fact that when General Babangida staged a palace coup on August 27, 1985, I'm talking of when he removed, and his colleague plotted the removal of another military head of state, General Muhammadu Buhari. He said, he criticized the Buhari Idi Agbon Tanzani's junta for not fixing a terminal date. So he said, we are going to leave office in 1990. In October 1990. 1990 came. He postponed the terminal date to 1992. 1992 came. He changed it to January 1993. January 1993 came, he changed it to August 1993. But what we did in 1992 was to say this postponement had to stop. So we organized protests and published posters. Babangida must go.
IBB must go was very popular on the front pages of them.
Yes.
Was major headlines on
on
major newspapers.
Of course, we were arrested in Lagos, brought to Abuja, FCT, and detained in Kuje prison under decree number 2. When the late Chief Gani Femi went to court, Dr. Bekoran Samkuchi, Baba Omojola, an economist, and myself were brought to Kuje prison in 1992. Chief Femi went to court on our behalf. For going to court on our behalf, he too was arrested and made to join us in prison. So I think on the 19th of May, they deceived us in prison that we're going home. So we packed our things. The vehicle that was taking us to the airport purportedly made some maneuver, and we found ourselves at the Gwagwalada Chief Magistrate Court, where we were charged with treasonable felony. Of course, they brought the then announced president to join us. So 5 of us were charged with treasonable felony. Since we had no access to our lawyers, so the late Chief Gani Femi and I decided to defend ourselves and our colleagues. So even though we're asking for bail, we turn our arraignment to the trial of the junta. And I recall on that occasion, Chief Femi told the judge, my chief magistrate, Malam Bulama, that those who should be standing trial for treason, those who should be in this dock, are in the villa, led by General Babangida, because they had sacked, they had overthrown a democratically elected government on December 31st, 1983. So those are the people that should be standing trial. Mr. And of course, no, just a point. When it came to my turn, I made it clear to the judge. This section of the law, Section 41 of the Criminal Code Act, which provides anybody who forms an intention to remove the president of his country during his term of office, otherwise than by constitutional means. I said, my lord, the man calling himself my president has no fixed term of office. So I couldn't have been brought here. Of course, the judge adjourned. 2 weeks later, he granted us bail, very liberal term, 20,000 around one shot in like so. The regime could not stand another proceeding. They couldn't go back to court. So that we don't turn the thing into a full trial of General Babangida and others. So they simply ran away. And the case was struck out. So I'm going to challenge the malicious prosecution. My malicious prosecution and that of my colleagues.
Is it not time bound? Because, no. I mean, so you want to prosecute General Babangida for whatever happened in his time as a military head?
No, I've assembled a team of lawyers, they are looking into it, because he has now brought it to life.
What exactly are you bringing?
He has brought it back to life by now admitting that there was no basis for my prosecution, because he now says Abiola won the election, which was the basis of our protest. He's also saying, he shouldn't have, postpone the terminal date of his transition program, which again we're fighting. So which means there was no basis for our prosecution. It's malicious. Again, massive infringements of our rights, human rights. Because when you keep me in Kuje prison, you deny me my right to liberty, my freedom of movement. You also violate my right to choose the government of my country, pursuant to Article 13 of the African Charter.
Is the matter not started bad?
No, it's not started bad. Because the man who did it has just come out to say, I did it wrongly.
Mr. Falana, there is something that you said you have...
And again, let me say this. You know, it's not in our court. You can talk of something very started.
To the bad, yeah.
In the ECOWAS court in Abuja here, in the case of Femi Falana and Republic of Benin and others, the court said any violation after 3 years cannot be pursued here. But later, you know, the improvement of the jurisprudence of the court has now come to the conclusion. I think that was in the case of Federation of Journalists, you know, Gambia, and the government of that country, that once you are talking of serious, gross abuse of human rights, statute of limitation does not apply.
Let me take you on one very, very controversial matter that was also raised by the former head of state in his book, and it has to do with the late Delegiwa. And let me quote part of what he said. He said, and I quote, "My sense of loss was, however, overwhelmed by the public outcry and the feeling of tragedy in the introduction of an entirely novel mode of killing in our country, coming a few weeks after the OIC crisis, which led to the retirement of my number 2 Commodore, Ebitu Kue. I saw Giwa's wicked and cruel murder as part of a series of booby traps and acts of destabilization being hatched against the administration." End of quote. That's the account of General Babangida. And he said, hopefully, that one day, he said, Giwa was loved by his audience and the rest of the public. Targeting him would shock the public and paint the administration in a feeble light. He's saying that one day, the death and the truth about Delegiwa's death will be uncovered.
When he frustrated the attempt by the state to uncover, you know, the cause of that incident.
General Babangida in the book, Mr. Falana says that a lot of people know his closeness with Delegiwa, and they wanted to use that to paint him black, his administration black.
His relationship with General Vatsa, right, was much, much closer than that of Delegiwa. Vatsa was his best man. They grew up together. They were sleeping in the same room as bachelors, right? He had him killed without any basis. But coming to Delegiwa first. On October 19, 1986, when that unfortunate incident happened, one of the early callers in Delegiwa's house at Okpebi in Lagos was the late Mr. Tony Momma, the information minister of the junta. And he said publicly, just like I said, because of the novel manner of this death, we have never seen it before.
The popular letter bomb.
Yes. We're going to have a public inquiry. 2 days later, the junta reneged on the decision that a public inquiry would be conducted. As if that was not enough, the late Chief Gani Fahimi, a personal friend and lawyer to Delegiwa, took up the matter, wrote to the government, if you are not willing to prosecute, I am going to prosecute. Right? The government ignored him. Gani went to court. The High Court said you have no local standi. What is personal to you? What interest do you have that is greater than members of the public in this unfortunate incident? You went to the Court of Appeal, the same ruling. But the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, roar like a lion. And in a very unique jurisprudential exposition, the Supreme Court held. I think the leading judgment was delivered by Justice Obaseki, who said, in Nigeria, you cannot challenge a concerned citizen for questioning the death of another person. The late Justice Esho put it in a more admirable manner when he said, the English concept of brother, neighborliness, requires blood brother, has nothing to do with us in Africa, where you have the extended family system, and that in matters of this nature, we are all our brothers' keepers. And therefore, Ghana, as local standard. You know what happened? Ghana then went to start the battle.
From the trial court all over again.
Unknown to him, the junta had secretly amended the law, Criminal Procedure Code of Lagos State, to limit private prosecution of criminal cases to perjury. So by the time Ghana now started, the lawyer of the suspect of the government raised an objection that, my lord, you no longer have jurisdiction. The right to prosecute anybody for murder has been shifted. This matter was raised at Oputa. Ghani gave his evidence.
I was going to make reference to Justice Oputa. And Mr. Falana, I'd like us to wrap up in this manner. I imagine that perhaps the reason, the intention of General Babangida was to lay a lot of questions, answer them, and lay things to rest, and offer a public apology. Unfortunately,
the book has raised more questions.
And you think it has opened some more
Pandora box.
Now, the question here is that, is it possible that we move away from this history?
Take the one of Mama Vatsa, right? It was a case of premeditated murder. Whereas Vatsa and other officers were arrested in December 1985 on suspicion that they were planning a coup. At that time, the law did not allow the military. And so what happened? A month after the arrest, while they were in detention, General Babangida promulgated a decree on January 6, 1986, to try people who were arrested a month earlier. It's murder.
Mr. Falana, a lot of these things that happened in the military junta, and when we imagine that this, the military regime is with force and sometimes without no depth of thought, of civility and democratic thought.
As the Supreme Court said in the case of Garba and Federal Civil Service Commission, the military, in coming to power, again, this is the language of Justice Esho, is always faced with whether to allow the rule of law to operate or rule of force. But once the rule of law is taken, it's chosen, you must do everything in accordance with the law. So they had their choice. They pretended they were civilized. And so they rule by decrees. And so once you depart from the enabling decree, the court will strike down.
On a final note, I thought Justice Oputa's panel would have also helped to heal. And you were a very active participant in that session, which was supposed to be our own kind of a panel of a healing, reconciliation, and Nigeria moving forward from the horrific past of the military days. But on a final note, Mr.
General Babangida went to court to stop the panel from inviting him to give his own account. Oh, yes.
So where do we go from here? You say you are taking this matter to court.
Oh, I'm suing the general for engaging in the massive infringement of my fundamental human rights. I'm also challenging the malicious prosecution of my person and my colleagues.
Senator Oji Uzor-Kalu is saying that President Tinubu should recognize for late MK Abiola as a former president of Nigeria. Do you think that was necessary?
It's already, since 1993, he has been recognized by the people of Nigeria as an elected president. They are just these guys, who try to set the hands of the club are just recognizing that now. And the last one is about this, they want to set up a library. No former military head of state has ever set up a library. What do you want to read there? You can only have a library set up by an elected president. You understand me? So I hope they will, title it well. It should be military, a former military president, whatever, library. It shouldn't just be a presidential library because you confuse people.
General Babangida made it clear that it was military president, and there are those who debated that there's nothing like that.
No, that's not clear. No. You can't have a military president because a president is elected by the people. And so he said why he chose the title in the book, why he chose the title president was that he did it in line with the suspended provision of the Constitution. That suspended provision of the Constitution, they don't recognize a military dictator. Everybody every officer under that Constitution must be elected.
Mr. Falana, thank you so very much. Do let us know as you move on with your litigation.
For sure, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, my pleasure.
We'll take a break, everyone, but when we return, NBS report today is saying that the economy has improved, but we will be probing and investigating some of the details of the figures, and I'll be joined by Dr. Tope Fashua. He's a special advisor to President Bola Tinubu on economic affairs. That's after this break, everyone. Thank everyone for staying with us. So, the NBS has again come out, and this time around, they are professing that there's good news. Nigeria's gross domestic product, the GDP, had a 3.84% increase in growth rate in the fourth quarter of 2024. And this is according to a GDP report published by the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, earlier today. It says that the growth rate is higher than the 3.46% recorded in the fourth quarter of 2024. And the figure released today of the Q4 of 2024 is also higher than the 3.46% reported in the fourth quarter of 2023. The performance of the GDP in the fourth quarter of 2024 was driven mainly by the services sector, which recorded a growth of 5.37% and contributed 57.38% to the aggregate GDP. So let's get some insight into what this means altogether. I'm being joined tonight on the program by Dr. Tope Fashua. He's a special advisor to the president on economic matters. It's indeed a pleasure having you join us tonight.
Thanks very much for inviting me.
It does look like the last quarter of 2024 was a good way to end the year.
Oh, yeah.
As we now know, there are a lot of people who are still writhing in the pains of what the economy over the last few months have cost. But then, would you say we are setting out of the rubble because of some of the policy decisions, tough decisions they were, and we perhaps are seeing a brighter day?
I believe so, very strongly, and I think the growth rate will pick up even further as we go along. Yes, there may be a bit of slowdown in the first quarter of this year. Usually first quarters are a bit slow because a lot of spending gets done in December, which actually trickles off in January. But even at that, and I'm hoping that the rebased GDP comes out very quickly in time, maybe sometime in March, So, but even at that, I think that we've turned the corner for the economy. The reforms were very critical and very important, as you well know. But there's been some very good sides of the reforms. Of course, we're talking about the Naira reform. We're talking about the fuel subsidy reforms. The fuel subsidy reforms have unleashed a lot of good things in the petroleum sector, apart from also freeing up a lot of money for, to the states, to the federal, and also even now the local government. But you see that Nigeria has become something of a net exporter, even though we still import a bit, and I've seen that. But we're importing about 20 years low, or even 30 years low now. And of course, the target is zero importation. But the other time, you had Dangote refineries exported jet fuel to Saudi Arabia, no less than Saudi Aramco, perhaps the biggest oil company in the world. So I think we're getting into that international space as well as a country, driven by that gentleman I mentioned. But also we see that even NNPC, which is a state-owned company, is also trying to pull his weight. It's going to be a little bit choppy for now, but it's trying to pull his weight. Everybody's under pressure. That's as far as the petroleum sector is concerned. On the on the removal of subsidy, of course, we'll talk about that. On the management of the foreign exchange, what has happened is we hit an inflection point where behaviors have started to be affected. So it used to be that, of course, I mean, I was recently with someone who traveled to abroad and said, look, I'm not going to shop when I go this time. I'd rather buy what I want in this country. And so we're looking at options and different alternatives to things that we used to buy from abroad. So that's the way people should think. And I think this time around, we're getting to that point. And if, indeed, it's very important for me to address this somewhat pervasive sense of pessimism, and of course it's easy to just blot it out and say, there's so much problem in the country, people are just suffering and so on. Everybody should reposition. There's no country in the world where nobody is suffering. I mean, if you went to some of the best countries in the world, you see it on the streets. I wouldn't say too much about that, but everybody should try and reposition and ensure that they're doing something productive. They're trying to get involved, open your eyes, stay positive. And I think there won't be anything too wrong sometimes, even if we in government would try and admonish people constantly and push them and nudge them.
So you're saying that Nigerians should tighten their belt?
Not tighten their belt. This is not the time to tighten. Just position yourself for the goodies. Don't wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, the country is falling over everybody and so on. People are making money. Businesses are getting done. What has happened in this petroleum sector, as I've mentioned, with Dangote coming up, employing maybe 20 to 30,000 people in that, that place in Bejuleki, has opened up the entire Bejuleki. Property prices are going up. Small businesses have set up around there. People are renting, and when you rent and you move in there, you need drivers, you need cooks, this is employment. So what has happened as a result of that reform in the oil sector alone has employed, when I did the calculation, anything between 200 and 400,000 new people. Even in the Port Harcourt and the worry that they are trying to reposition. We know what that means if a refinery was totally dead, but all of a sudden you see some activity, meaning that worry used to, they used to rue the day that because of a lot of ethnic crisis in that region, Shell moved out of worry. But now, if this refinery will really take off, some activity will come back to worry, and that's the way it works.
Let me take you on some reality check, Dr. Fasua. And I think that it is also fundamental, as much as I try on this program to break down the issues in such a way that we touch on what is practical and reality rather than talking on the technical jargons. The president came into power and he knocked on the very foundation of our economy. He made some policy decisions that went to the very root of the system. And there are those who will say the needs of a human, they are basic. When you are able to deal with those needs, perhaps in order of priority, you'll be able to get yourself going. So people will talk about transportation. People will talk about food prices. People will talk about cost of living, prices of commodities. These things were badly impacted. So the low-hanging fruit are what people are asking for. The average person, which are in the majority, if they are not feeling it in the immediate, how longer should they wait, Dr. Fasua, for those who are listening to you tonight to say, yes, this policy, this figure, just for a moment, okay, these figures are showing that things are getting in the positive, but the average person is perhaps not feeling it just yet. Therefore, how much longer should they wait?
Therefore, nobody is asking anybody to, look, I mean, get me very, very correctly. And I didn't come to say, go and tighten your belt, wait for Godot and all of that, And what I've said very clearly here is that the opportunities are there. Open your eyes and stay positioned. Look, if somebody makes themselves unemployable, they're going to have issues. But if you avail yourself, okay, I mean, there are even if you was training, there are free training all over the internet that people use. So either you are using the time to abuse the government and abuse the big men or wherever they are on the internet, or you are taking a training to reposition yourself for better employment, So times have changed, So nobody is saying that the people should continue to suffer. No, I'm saying that already, and mind you, of course, this is in the realm of cognitive dissonance, people will usually say when they're suffering. But when people get advantage, you won't hear anything. In this same country, somebody lost $3-point-something billion, $1 million, which was equivalent of 6 billion naira. And he lost it, a comedian or something, lost the money on FX, FX gamble. Indeed, that's what I call it. People do FX trading and all of that. And that's 6 billion. And you wouldn't have known that someone in that realm had 6 billion. And of course, he still has some more money today. And how many people are sitting on such kind of money? So we're not saying that people should continue to suffer. We're saying that already the economy is ticking up. Look, 3.46, 3.84. Likelihood of we're going to get into 4-5% growth rate in the next quarter or two. We're going to probably, when we're looking at the rebasing that we're talking about, is about looking at where the economy really is now. People want to disparage it. You can't disparage it because
is this something that needed to have been done. A rebasing of the GDP too?
Sorry?
Is this administration planning a rebasing of the GDP?
Are you kidding me? I mean, we've been on it for more than 6 months, right? Carefully being put together. The MBS is doing their work. Okay, we've talked about the inflation rebase, the CPI rebase in a couple of weeks. Nobody should say that we shouldn't look at where our balance sheet is as an organization, as a government, as a country. It's about looking at where your balance sheet is, doing the revaluation. Even if you're in the private sector, running a company, you would have to do it. We ought to have done this 6 years ago. 6 years ago. So now let's say, okay, where are we today? What is the economy doing? How much is services contributing? Have we done a little bit better on the industry? What about trade and all of that? And then we put out the numbers. And if you look at it very carefully, the reforms that Mr. President has carried out, which is something that a lot of governments have not been able to do in the past, was to give us that reality check and to say, you know what, let's step back a little bit so that we can run even faster. And I think that that's when you say, okay, now, game on. Let's see how much of the $1 trillion we can meet in 2030. If we can get to 700, 750, nobody will say we failed. So that's how it is. So we're lucky we have a strong leader who actually is prepared for the job. Of course, there'll be issues of income inequality, but let me tell you what, Mr. President has taken that initiative. The minimum wage is now 70,000 naira. A lot of the states are doing 80,000 naira minimum wage, and they've also started paying that, meaning that money is going out. The states are sitting on a lot of cash now to not only pay their obligations, salaries, pensions, and what have you, but to also do a lot of local infrastructure. We're sitting on an effort where we could have an infrastructure explosion in this country, especially at the state and local government.
You've not quite answered my question.
No, because my question was wrong.
No, hold on.
Certainly.
My question was, you probably didn't get it. My question really is, you are an economist, and projection is part of what you do. Absolutely. And you do that a lot of the time. Yes. I wanted you to be able to paint a projection picture for the Nigerian people.
Absolutely.
Who perhaps are seeing a growth rate that is beneficial and positive in the Q4 of 2024.
Right.
And it means that whatever will happen in the morning, perhaps in the night, you might have a signal for whatever happens in the morning, what happened in the night, you will see the signs during the day. So the question is that there are a lot of expectations. Things might be difficult for a lot of people right now. I wanted you to paint a picture and maybe give a lot of Nigerians who are watching tonight a kind of a promissory note to say, in the next 3 months, in the next 5 months, these are the possibilities. These are what your government is doing that will help this the Nigerian people. First of all, that is what I was asking of you.
I get you, man. And that is my work. I wake up every day. I'm full of hope. I was in France a couple of days back. I literally ran out of that country because all I saw was a lot of hopelessness in the city of Paris. Everywhere was painted over with graffiti. There seemed to be a war on the streets. And I came into this country, and as I was coming into this country, I was feeling the hope. And I saw a virgin country where we could do a whole lot for our people, and we have started. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying that, first of all, Nigerians look within, first and foremost, position for the benefits of this country. This whole idea of running away from the country, it's a joke anyway. When they get there, they quickly realize
so that is not.
It's a joke. Honestly, right now, I mean,
people should not seek a better life.
You can better life. in the temporary, it's not that you're looking temporary, you're looking long term, but long term, this is where we are. This is where we were born. I'm not one of those Kemi Badenoch people who would say it's nasty things about their country. There's hope in this country. And I'm saying that, look, let's even take the game first to the states. Lagos State is running a 3.3 trillion budget, and the commissioners came out a couple of weeks back and said, listen, we're going to run this budget without borrowing a dime. Nasarawa State has said they will not borrow. Enugu State will say they will not borrow. 5 states are on record to say, look, we can run our budget, we don't even have to borrow into the medium term. You know what I'm saying? That means that maybe a little bit of nudge to those state governors to say, okay, where are we spending the money? How can we get position? That is where the game is right now. Beyond the federal government. The federal government is there to think about policy, to think about big projects. You want to run a road between Lagos to Sokoto, Lagos to Calabar. Let the federal government deal with those things. But when you're talking about, the nitty-gritty that affects the people, first of all, how many of the states have not started paying the minimum wage? How many are owing pensions? Put them under pressure. Some of the states are getting ×3 what they were getting a couple of years ago. And that's where, I think that you should also put some of the states under pressure, because there's a lot they can do in terms of local infrastructure, which opens things up, assists the farmers to get their crops to the city, get into the value chain and earn some money. And look, a lot is happening. Cocoa was the best commodity for the whole of 2024. Cocoa did better than gold. There's a clip online here, somebody from Midori, the state where I'm from. And, as the truck was going, the guy was saying, listen, this is 400 million. A local guy said, this is the money we spend in those states. This is Midori. People are repositioning. Quickly, the only challenge you will probably find is that, unlike in the 70s and 80s, when our fathers used the cocoa money to build their petesi, what we call petesi, upstairs that had the wooden, what's it called, decking, that had the wooden decking. Now there's a lot more externality. Their money is going on outside. People using money to bet. People trying to build houses in London or buy houses in America. It's a lot easier now, and these are the things that we think about as economists for our country in this contemporary time.
We need to close now.
There's a lot of hope for this economy.
We need to close.
And people should just stay positive.
We need to close now. For example, end of Q1, end of Q2. What are the expectations? Because this government must project.
Absolutely.
What are the figures? What are the expectations?
Well, it's a bit difficult to just say any kind of figures. Now, if in the Q1, if the Q1 would come out, on the current basis for the GDP, I think it could dip a little bit to maybe 3.5%. But by Q2, I think we're going to begin to think about 4.5%. As things stand, and in fact, it could be a whole lot better, because I think by then the rebase numbers should come up, and from the current $258 billion for the economy, which could be looking at about $400 to $450 billion for the economy, and back to #1 position, at the minimum #2 position in Africa. We're a great country with great prospects, and I think that I would want to urge you, Sheung, stay positive. Always give the people the positive angle for the economy. It's the easiest thing to do. You say, the country is falling. But this country hasn't even started. We're just about starting, this economy. And luckily, with a strong leader like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I believe that we're going to get somewhere. Thank you very much.
Dr. Tokwe Fasua is a special advisor to President Bola Tinubu on economic matters. Thanks so much indeed. We are hopeful for our country, and we are hoping that the leaders will take the bull by the horn and do the right thing.
States.
Yeah, states too. They are part of the leaders.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Fasua. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Man, thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. God bless Nigeria.